So, I'm going to share an interesting fact that's really helped me come to a better understanding of posture. Thing about posture is there's this idea that there is good posture, and that's not really true. Uh, it's came about in the 1950s from kind of keeping your back straight and everything like that. So there's no one good posture, but posture is important. And so the thing we want to think about is how to keep the eyes level with the horizon. Your body does this naturally. So if you have a lot of kinks in your spine, basically, and also remember the fact that bones aren't stable and fixed, they respond organically to movement. So if you have scoliosis, that might not mean that your spine is actually stuck that way. It might mean that your spine is kinking so that your eyes maintain level with the horizon. If you look at people, for example, my head is slightly off axis, and I believe that's because my eyes are trying to maintain level with the horizon. I just came to an interesting conclusion this weekend as I was hiking in the woods, and I was noticing the gentle sway of motion as I'm walking. What's called contralateral motion, when your hips move forward and the shoulder on top of that hip moves back, and then it kind of goes back and forth between each shoulder, so your shoulders are moving in opposition to your hips. So when you get that nice flow and your spine is moving and rotating as you walk, as I was noticing that, I was also noticing that there's this, the head and the neck try to stabilize so that your eyes aren't bouncing all around all the time. But in me, because my spine was essentially has some issues with it, with the musculature and the fascia, my eyes have been stabilized by accessory muscles of the eyes, as opposed to being kind of level at the level of the atlas occipital joint in the back of the head. Like that's where that should kind of do some shock absorption. And so now I'm kind of unwinding all this stuff. And another interesting point is that a lot of this has to do with emotional trauma. And if you think you don't have emotional trauma, you should probably think again, because it doesn't necessarily need to be adverse childhood experiences, which actually quite a few people do have. It can also just be thinking about death. If you are totally comfortable with the idea of you dying, maybe you don't need to do that much emotional work. But as human beings, we have it in us evolutionarily to fear death. And if you have that fear of death, you have emotional work that can be done. And I don't mean this in the sense of work like mechanical, physical work, but more inquiry into that fear. What is death? We don't really know what death is. Everybody who's died is not here anymore. They cannot bring that information back. Oh, of course, we have people who have gone on DMT trips from almost dying, but then they come back into a body. So they can't really, they come back into that subjective frame of awareness. So they can't really translate what death really is. They can give you a image, they can give you a dream, but they can't really tell you what death is. So we got started talking about the spine, and then I went on to death. But I think it's a really important thing to remember that your eyes are trying to maintain balance with the horizon. And there's a whole bunch of muscles around the eyes, 6 of them, and they rotate and do all these things. And what I realized is that my eyes are, all those muscles are on fire all the time. And so I finally, this last week, I learned how to relax them, which is a huge step for me. And it has to do with the connection between the eyes and the back of the head. Here is an interesting exercise you can do. Place your fingers at the back of your head, and then just kind of move your eyes around and notice the musculature in the back of the head also moves. So there's a direct muscular connection between your head and the back of your head and your eyes. So interesting things. Always good to remember that song that people sung when we were younger, which is the eye bones are connected to the head bone is connected to the spine. I actually don't remember it, but that, like, the whole body's fucking connected, people. Seriously. You can't separate it out. You can't cut off your arm and say, oh, look, this is the arm that is disconnected from the rest of my body. Let's study this. It's all fucking connected. Get with it.